The Bit of Sports, Mark Daniels, Scott Adams in for Jerry Green today. This portion of our program is brought to you by our friends at Orlando Highline Racebook, 1792-436 in Fern Park. Each week, among the things that we follow in college football are polls. Polls tell us what we think when it comes to how good teams are. And the Associated Press may not be part of the not be part of the BCS formula, but nonetheless, it's used, and we recognize it. If your team's ranked, you like it. If it's not ranked, and you wonder what's going on. Hugh Falk joins us from Pollspeak to chat a little bit about this past week's poll. Hugh, good morning. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. First, tell people what Pollspeak is.
All right. So Pollspeak is a website that keeps track of all the different polls and computer rankings out there. We do it for multiple sports, but the one people are most passionate about is college football because so much is relying on the polls and computer rankings in college football. At least in FBS college football, there's no tournament to resolve things; it all gets resolved in the polls. So what Pollspeak does is we're a watchdog for those polls, making sure that there aren't mistakes, making sure that there isn't corruption, and just giving people the ability to actually see how people are voting in these polls.
All right, speaking of that, we found, you found not one but two mistakes in this week's poll that actually led to the poll being re-released. What happened this week?
All right, so this week a voter up in Jacksonville, Mike DeRocco, he made a mistake in his ballot, and he caught it himself. He basically, last week, Missouri was upset by Arizona State. And I guess in his own notes, he had it wrong. So he had Arizona State over Missouri, and he turned in his ballot with Missouri still ranked over Arizona State. He caught it, and he submitted a new ballot to the AP. And the AP said, great, we got it. However, what the AP did was instead of replacing his ballot with his new ballot, they still used his old ballot. And that was the mistake that we caught because as we have a free tool on our site called Pollstalker, which will show you how everybody's voting and show you, where someone's ranked highest in the nation or where someone's ranked lowest in the nation. And we saw that he had Missouri higher than anyone else in the nation. And not only that, he had Arizona State unranked. And Arizona State had just beaten Missouri, so that raised a red flag for us. So we contacted him, and he said, yeah, but I turned in my new ballot. So we contacted the AP, and they were kind of silent on the issue, which is unusual. As it turned out, what they did was they took his new ballot, and instead of replacing his old ballot, they replaced somebody else's ballot. So not only did DeRocco's old ballot still stay in the poll, but they removed somebody else's ballot by mistake.
So they redid the poll, which actually did change a couple of rankings, correct?
Yep. The biggest change was probably Nebraska and South Carolina switching places, which it's not a huge deal, but it's now South Carolina can say they're a top 10 team, and Nebraska, well, they can't say they're a top 10 team. So people do care about that type of stuff. Also, some other minor things. Texas moved up a spot, and some other minor changes. One first-place vote got changed, so Alabama got an extra first-place vote, and Oklahoma lost a first-place vote.
Hugh, I love the accountability, the checks and balances system, and one of the cool things that I found on the site is your bad voter of the week and your good voter of the week. Explain exactly what you do with that.
Okay, so right now on Pollspeak, you can go and you can check out everybody's ballot. And you could also check out your favorite team. So, if you're a fan of UCF or whatever, you can go to see how everybody ranked UCF from top to bottom, or Alabama from top to bottom, or whoever. And then when you see how everybody voted, you could click on those people and you could see their ballot. Then at that point, you can actually rate them as a good voter or a bad voter. And you can only pick one good voter each week and one bad voter each week. And then at the end of the week, we go ahead and publish, who everybody thought was the good voter of the week and who was the bad voter of the week.
Are you a poll guy, playoff guy, or what?
I'm both. I would like to see a little bit of a playoff. The problem with college football is that you're never going to have enough games in a season to make everybody happy, at least in college football. So you're going to need polls, and you're going to need something like the BCS. I like the BCS in general for helping to seed what we consider a playoff. But even if we had a 4-team playoff, which I'm not sure we would ever get to, it's not enough. Imagine if the NCAA basketball tournament only had 4 teams in it as opposed to 60-plus teams. People would be just as upset. So I actually see college football right now as having a playoff system, and it's getting more and more like that every year. With the conferences expanding the way they're expanding and having their own conference championship games. Now the Big Ten has a championship game and the Pac-12 has a championship game, which they never did before. It's kind of like they're having their own playoff. Unfortunately, the Big 12 lost a couple of teams, so they don't have a championship game anymore. But I do expect all conferences to take care of their own business, and then the champions of those will be seated in the BCS. So the season itself is kind of like a playoff already, and given the limited number of games that we have, it's probably the best we're going to get, except for maybe adding one extra game or something.
If I'm correct, the coaches you can't get access to the coach poll each week, correct?
Nope, and that's another thing we have on our site. The one thing we don't like about the BCS is that the 2 human polls they have in it, the coaches and the Harris Interactive, both use private ballots. The AP is the only one that every single week has public ballots. So we have a petition on our site. If anybody wants to help out, that's how they can help. Go sign the petition. We petition the BCS to make every single ballot every single week available to the public. There are lots of potential issues with the coaches poll. People have brought up, maybe the coaches aren't even voting. Some people jokingly refer to it as the sports information directors poll. Maybe the fact that coaches don't have time, hopefully they don't have time to watch every game that's going on and might not be making the most informed decisions. But the biggest issue is that they don't release their ballots, so we don't know what's going on. We don't know if they're voting everybody in their conference, high, just total biased, or maybe they're making mistakes of their own. We have no idea. If the BCS would just require that any poll that's involved in the BCS made everything public, we would like the BCS a lot more.
The coaches release just their final poll. They don't release a poll during the season. Has the BCS ever responded as to why they've agreed to allow the Harris and the coaches to stay private each week?
Well, the BCS doesn't control the coaches, so they don't have any control over that. They could request it, or they could replace it if they chose to. But the Harris Interactive is a poll they control. They actually contracted that. When the AP pulled out of the BCS, they created the Harris Interactive poll to replace the AP in the BCS, and they could require that if they want. The problem with the BCS is that they think that the only thing that matters is the BCS. In other words, they release their polls the week before the final BCS rankings come out. So they're like, oh, well, that's all anyone cares about. But that's not true, because rankings matter all year long. The teams that get the best TV ratings are the ones with the highest poll rankings. They're the ones that get the most TV revenue. They're the ones that show up in newspapers every week. They're the ones who get the most interest from the recruits. Polls, like them or not, are really important to college football. And they don't just matter for who's the national champion. They matter all year long. They mean a lot. They mean the difference between billions of dollars to the various schools based on your poll ranking.
It's interesting because I think in watching, and I've followed your site now for a couple of years, that there are, at least on the AP side, there are guys that do drastically change their poll the first couple of weeks because some guys vote based on who they think will be the champions at the end of the year. Others vote who they think at the moment, and will massively jump somebody if they have a great game that perhaps wasn't a poll that now appears 14th or 15th. That happens sometimes. Yeah,
and we're totally in favor of that. In fact, the AP is the only one that actually publishes guidelines to its voters, and one of the things it says is you should vote based on performance on the field, not on your own personal, speculation about what you think might happen or preseason bias. What they don't want to see happen is just because a team was ranked number 1 in the preseason, if they start to suck, they don't want you to keep them number 1 throughout the whole season. That doesn't make any sense. They hadn't played any games in the preseason, so don't hold on to that. However, they don't force people to vote in any way. So yeah, some people ignore that, and they do. They do hold on to preseason bias. As far as the coaches in the Harris poll, they don't really give their voters any direction whatsoever, other than say, these votes should be your votes and not somebody else's.
It's a great site, and it's how I can find out that Chad Kripe, the guy at the Idaho Statesman, is voting UCF the highest at 20th compared to anybody else, and that's the cool stuff you can get there. The website, again, is Pollspeak.com, Pollspeak.com. You Falk behind it. Thank you.
No, thank you guys.
Take care. Bye-bye. It's pretty cool. Like I said, you can get all the voters from the AP. Again, there's no access to the coaches.
And I wanted to throw this at him through the existence of the site itself. And like I mentioned, the checks and balances and the accountability for these AP voters themselves. Have they gotten any more maybe emails that have been somewhat negative once fans find out the way they voted, because you're able to go on there and find exactly who people have voted for?
Sure.
And it's astonishing to see that one guy maybe in some certain part of the country is voting Arkansas number 6 overall in the country, yet nowhere else on any of the other votes are they remotely close to a top 10
But he
ranking.
points that out. He shows you the highest and lowest ranking per vote that's out. It's a cool site. Again, Pollspeak.com, which I check out on a weekly basis several times. More to get to in the beat of sports. Later, the Master Basketball Knowledge, Brendan Sir, will join us, not just in the lockout, but why Jerry West and Phil Jackson hate each other's guts. All that more. Beat continues on ESPN 1080 The Team.